Another defensive tackle is getting paid, while Vita Vea remains disgruntled in Tampa. Plus, are injury scares threatening the Super Bowl dreams of some all-in teams? All that and more is coming your way here on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Well, hello and welcome to the Grey Duck NFL Show. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, and each week we deliver thoughtful analysis, clear-eyed discussion, and informed perspectives on the National Football League, covering the games, trends, performances, and storylines that help define the season. Whether you follow every snap or simply enjoy sharp football conversation, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Thank you for joining us here this evening. We are part of the Grey Duck Sports Network. You can follow us on Twitter or YouTube or TikTok or wherever you follow your podcasts. Either give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever it is that you do at that particular social media site. We are at Grey Duck Sports on both Twitter and YouTube, and at grey.duck.sports on TikTok. There we have all of our podcast episodes, including clips from every episode and different series of shorts about the history and stories that have happened in football, baseball, Minnesota, all of that. Again, that is at Grey Duck Sports on both Twitter and YouTube, and at grey.duck.sports on TikTok. Well, plenty of stuff to talk about here on show 1 of 2 this week. We'll be back on Friday for your fancy, but we're talking a lot of extension talk as that continues here with training camp now up and rolling at full force. We've got some disappointing injury news. We've even got a quarterback battle already decided in Minnesota. Plus, we will go and break down our Grey Duck Top 250. This time it is the safety positions. Again, this is our attempt at ranking the top 250 players in the NFL ahead of the 2026 season by going position by position every single show. And today we have hit the safety position. That'll be at the end of tonight's show. But first, let's get it started with Quinnen Williams and the Dallas Cowboys signing a big, juicy extension. 3 years, $109.5 million will keep him in Dallas for the long term. Now, Quinnen Williams was traded for a first and second round pick by the New York Jets to the Dallas Cowboys at the trade deadline in 2025. He looked great in New York. He looked great in Dallas. And there really isn't anything that can slow Quinnen Williams down. Now, he mostly played almost exclusively as a 3 technique with the Jets, and I think Matt Eberflus and company experimented a little bit more with Quinnen Williams as a 1 tech, a nose, a 3 tech at times as well. But he was kind of moved a little bit more around on the defensive front for the Dallas Cowboys after he came there. How is that going to look this year? You know, you really can't say unless you are at Dallas Cowboys training camp, because it is a new defensive coordinator with Christian Parker taking over for Matt Eberflus. So maybe Quinnen Williams goes right back to the 3 technique where I think he has had his most success, but make no mistake, he can play any single one of those positions on the defensive line. He can control any one of those gaps. He can break double teams from any assortment of offensive linemen, and he is going to be a huge pain in the butt to stop for opposing offensive lines everywhere. It, for me, just makes sense to put him at 3 technique because that's where I think he can have the greatest impact on the game, even though he can play at the same skill level at any one of those positions. You might be asking yourself, is this extension worth it? It is a higher extension than any defensive tackle in terms of average annual value in NFL history, outside of the one that Jalen Carter signed with the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of weeks ago. And I would say it is a resounding yes that Quinnen Williams' contract is worth it. And if you compare it specifically to Jalen Carter and Jalen Carter's extension alone, then this is a cheap value buy for the Dallas Cowboys. Finally, maybe fixing their organizational procedural process that has plagued them over the last 5 years and came to a head when they had to let go of Micah Parsons. They like to drag off these extensions until like the day before the regular season. They did that with Dak, with CeeDee Lamb in the past, with Ezekiel Elliott, all of those guys. But last year, Micah Parsons had said no more and kind of forced his way out via a trade to the Green Bay Packers. So maybe after that came to a head, the Dallas Cowboys and the Jerry Jones and company family finally work a little bit more ahead of schedule, ahead of time, to get a key defensive player locked down for the Dallas Cowboys. And Quinnen Williams is a player that can change the math for any defense that the Cowboys go up against this year. If you are wanting to completely rebuild from the studs down, the Cowboys defense that was the worst in the NFL in terms of scoring defense last year, then Quinnen Williams, you couldn't find many more players better to start out that defensive rebuild than Quinnen Williams, which is why, for me, it always made sense for Dallas to make this trade last year, because it wasn't just a 2025 rest of season move, it was also a future of this defense that has looked so helpless over the last 2 seasons sort of move. And he now allows you to build around him for the next 3 seasons, and he is very easily a player that you can build around. Now, I watched a ton of Quinnen Williams film today after the news of the extension broke, and what I noticed is he is a guy that just does not lose one-on-one and really doesn't lose double teams too often either. He is going to control you with his hands. He can win with his first step. He can win in so many ways with fluid hips as well, and he is a relentless player against both the run and as a pass rusher. He never really quits, and he has a full bag of moves that he uses to get him into the backfield at all costs. Even if he is 3 seconds into a pass rush, he is still going into his bag for a 5th or 6th different move that he hasn't tried at that point, where his hands are able. Yeah, I think sometimes maybe his quickness, his lateral quickness, is not at an elite level, but his explosiveness at the snap, his get off, his hands, the way that he uses his hands, and just the pure power that they provide, and his ability to control 2 sides of an offensive lineman, the left gap and the right gap, against whatever offensive lineman that he is lined up against, make him such an integral part of this Dallas Cowboys defense moving forward. There is nothing he really doesn't do well. And looking at him, he might be the top defensive tackle in the league. And you're probably, and we'll get to that Grey Duck 250 conversation, I think, next week when we do defensive tackles. But for my money right now, based on what I've seen, I would say Quinnen Williams takes that title because he is so versatile, because he can play as a nose and be effective, because he can be a game wrecker as a 3 technique. Then yes, Quinnen Williams is worth every single penny. It is money well spent for the Dallas Cowboys, and they keep Quinnen Williams from being disgruntled like his counterpart in Tampa Bay, Vita Vea, who don't have too many updates on him, but he is still looking for a trade. No contract extension has been reached, and until they get to a point where a contract extension can be reached, and by the way, that's getting more and more expensive with every single one of these extensions by other defensive tackles that are signed during training camp, but until that extension comes, we can fully buy, even if it is a bluff, that Vita Vea is being shopped around and that there are teams that could use Vita Vea that might be able to put a package together for Vita Vea and revitalize their defense altogether. But going back to Quinnen Williams, the only time that he really gets into trouble is if he over pursues or he misses a tackle. He likes to be aggressive, and he's a heads-up player. He's a headsy player. He's an intelligent, high football IQ sort of guy that can tell where the run is going and reads it fairly well. But if he gets fooled, he's over pursuing because he doesn't always stick in his gap. And you don't want to put a leash on him and keep him to just the 1 or 2 gaps that he might be responsible for on any given run play, because I think then you are taking away one of his best superpowers. he does not need the gap integrity that a standard defensive tackle needs to have, because he typically knows when it is fine, when damage is limited, to leave your gap and leave your gap assignment in order to pursue a ball carrier. Now, the few times that he is wrong about that, that is when it can be an issue, and it can be break off a big gain for whatever running back he is going up against. But typically he is not wrong, and when he is aggressive and goes to a different gap that was not his assigned gap in the run fit at the start of the play, based on the defensive front, based on the play call, if he goes to a different gap assignment, he typically makes the right call way more often than not. And the other time is if he just misses a tackle. And I would also say that that doesn't happen very often. But those really are the only two ways that you can hope to beat Quinnen Williams, outside of just like triple teaming him in order to kind of just fully enclose him in a box. But that's going to allow a lot of other players on that Cowboys defense to make plays. He doesn't necessarily demand a double team, because you're not going to be that much more effective with a double team outside of just an ISO one-on-one Quinnen Williams against an interior player. But if he does ever demand a double team for against any single team, then that's going to open up a lot of Malachi Lawrence reps. I loved Malachi Lawrence coming out. It's going to open up Donovan Azaraku, his second-year player, to have some space to work with. Rashawn Gary. Kenny Clark, you can just put at the nose and let him do his job there, while Quinnen Williams eats in the 3 technique, and you don't have to blitz that often, and that's what Christian Parker wants. He's a Vic Fangio disciple. He wants to rush 4 and get pressure with 4 and use stunts and twists at times, but typically run a pretty straight-up defense in order to get pressure while being able to drop 7 guys into coverage in a match quarters, open, middle of the field open sort of system that I think suits the Dallas Cowboys better than the pure man cover 1 that Matt Eberflus played a lot of during the 2025 season, and that got burned pretty much on a weekly basis, no matter who the opposing quarterback was. So Quinnen Williams, locking him down, giving him confidence, giving him happiness, giving him peace of mind as he heads into this season, should allow him to play freely and allow a lot of other opportunities for Dallas Cowboys pass rushers to make some big plays. And oh yeah, Caleb Downs, one of the most versatile players and my top player from the 2025 or 2026 NFL draft, has also been getting rave reviews by Dallas beat reporters and teammates at training camp, not only as an in-the-box safety, but the biggest question mark, because we didn't see it a ton on film, is how would he do as a man-to-man slot defender, or just your overhang defender in a match system against... in the slot, he has gone man-to-man against CeeDee Lamb and has been able to hold his own and actually look pretty good doing it. So it looks like that question has been answered. I think this Dallas Cowboys defense is going to take the next steps significantly, and it will be upgraded significantly from what it was last year. I think we are talking about a team that, if it stays healthy, could be a top 10 defense in all of football to pair with a pretty damn good offense in the first place, and that is a sleeper team for me to make it to the Super Bowl. And that was before the Quinnen Williams extension. That is after the Quinnen Williams extension. That was as long as Quinnen Williams is on the roster, and the roster stayed as it has since the draft, then absolutely I think that this is a defense that can do some sneaky damage that some other, even people that have seen those moves and like the players that I like, that even they might not fully expect at this point. I have some high expectations for this Dallas Cowboys defense, and they did the right thing by keeping around the great Quinnen Williams for the long term. And again, Vita Vea still without a contract in Tampa Bay. Let's go, Tampa Bay. Let's go, Jason Light. Let's get that contract signed. Unless it truly is just an untenable situation and it isn't about the money, and it's about other things. But if it's about the money, blank check, Vita Vea, here you go. You can be a game wrecker too. There are only so many defensive tackles that can be that game wrecker. Vita Vea, I wouldn't put Jalen Carter there just yet. Dexter Lawrence and Quinnen Williams, for me, are 1, 2, and 3 in no particular order. So get Vita Vea his money and keep him around for the long term, or else Tampa Bay is going to go by the wayside. A better team is going to get Vita Vea, and they will be much better off for it. Well, going on from some big news in the NFL that is on the positive side to some still big news that hits a pretty heavy negative. Staying in the NFC East, the Washington Commanders over the weekend have lost their starting left tackle that they gave up good draft capital for. You might remember, during the 2025 offseason, they made a trade with the Houston Texans to acquire Laremy Tunsil. It wasn't I don't think it was a first-round pick. I think it was just a second-round pick, but it left them light on draft picks in both 2025 and 2026. And to make matters worse now, Laremy Tunsil is likely going to miss the entire 2026 season. He tore his triceps in a recent practice, and the timeline is typically around 6 months. So maybe if Washington makes the playoffs, they can get lucky and get him back for a playoff match. But this is a heavy blow to an offensive line that already had a ton of question marks for Washington, on a team that has a ton of question marks for basically everyone not named Jaden Daniels. I think a lot of folks, and maybe Terry McLaurin, everyone not named Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin could be playing for their jobs, and that just became a lot more difficult now that Laremy Tunsil is not going to be protecting the blind side of Jaden Daniels. And I think Laremy Tunsil gets a little bit overhated in the offensive line discourse. He is a very good offensive tackle who, with his football IQ, I think knows his strengths and knows his weaknesses and tries as best as possible to mitigate those weaknesses and rely on those strengths and put himself in a position where other teams can't put him in a spot to be at a weak point more often than not. And really what he does well, he's not necessarily this pure power sort of offensive tackle, but he is good at mirroring his edge rusher in pass protection. He has good hands. If his hips are square to you after the first step, you are probably not going to get to the quarterback. Really, the only time that you win against Laremy Tunsil when you are rushing the passer is if you can beat him by pure speed. But you have to beat him in pure speed from a 5 technique position or a 7 technique if a tight end is in there. You have to be right at Laremy Tunsil's hip in order to beat him with a speed rush. Because if you line up as a wide 9, which is way to the outside, get a good pass rush angle, Laremy Tunsil is able to close in on that angle without having to overset and can block you off on your angle to the quarterback because he is a heads-up player. He is a high football IQ player. He knows what angle you're taking, and he can beat you to that angle if you line up too wide. And then the other time that he can lose is if he sets, and typically you're doing that if you're trying to protect against an edge rusher. I wouldn't want to see Will Anderson on Laremy Tunsil if I was a Washington Commanders fan, and obviously I won't for the entire 2026 season unless the two teams meet in the Super Bowl and Laremy Tunsil is back and ready to go. Because I think Will Anderson could just win with speed right off of Laremy Tunsil's hip and make it a hellish sort of day for Laremy Tunsil by pairing that speed rush with some good counters whenever he can get Tunsil to overset and maybe cheat to the outside on his set a little bit following the snap of the football. Basically, the only way to beat him is to speed rush from the hip and then pair that up with some good interior counter moves to take advantage of the times where Tunsil oversteps. So he is a good pass protector. He really is from that left side. One of the best in the business that has a good game plan, that knows how to attack edge rushers. I think as a run blocker, he gets pretty fairly criticized because of some inconsistency where he just doesn't really, he can get the angles on guys, but he can't always get the push unless he has a full head of steam, and even then he can kind of whiff on blocks a little bit. So I think he does leave a little bit to be desired, but I think Jayden Daniels is going to be in a lot more trouble. Granted, he is a quarterback that can evade trouble a lot easier than a lot of other quarterbacks at the NFL level, but regardless, I think that he is going to get himself into a little bit more trouble now that his left tackle, who is a solid protector, isn't there. I don't necessarily think that there is a massive hit to the run game, however, but this does significantly with just how much how much more of an impact successful pass plays have again, as opposed to successful run plays. This is going to be a significant blow for the Washington Commanders, and I have significant concerns about their playoff viability. This was already a team that I did not have making the playoffs, that I probably had around 500, maybe a little bit less, with 7 wins. I think this cuts them a game or two down just with the loss of Laremy Tunsil, because there's just going to be a lot more pressure getting to Jayden Daniels, especially when Brandon Coleman is the replacement, who's not bad, but was mostly an interior guy for Washington last season, and he plays like an interior guy, and I worry about him getting caught lunging. He has a good anchor that can win against power, but I'm not sure that he's going to be able to handle the good, speedy, athletic edge rushers, or even not necessarily the athletic one or the speedy ones, but the ones that just have that hip fluidity to get you on a double move quickly, or to fool you enough with the jab step to get you to set a little bit too far to the inside, and then you can run around the corner if you are the edge rusher. Because I think you can get Brandon Coleman to lunge a lot on the first move, and I think he's going to have a problem dealing with the quick and fast offensive tackles, and I think you are going to have more of a sieve on the left side, on Jayden Daniels' blind side, on your franchise quarterbacks, the side that he is turning his back to on every single drop back. You are going to have a lot more issues on this side now with Brandon Coleman that you didn't have with Laremy Tunsil. I think he's a bit better of a run blocker than Tunsil is, but I think when you kind of even everything out, you are going to be much worse off because of the steep decline you are getting in pass protection, at least at a left tackle position for Brandon Coleman. If he was on the interior, I trust him a little bit more to be a pass protector. But on the left side of the offensive line as the blindside protector, I'm going to have to see it before I truly believe that Brandon Coleman can be an adequate enough pass rusher or pass protector replacement for Laremy Tunsil in order for Tunsil's injury and the impact that it has on the season to be completely minimized from a Washington Commanders perspective. So that is kind of my quick breakdown on Laremy Tunsil and on Brandon Coleman. And he is not the only offensive lineman that is dealing with an injury. Another one, we'll go to the NFC North now, is a free agent acquisition, Cade Mays, who had a good breakout season with the Carolina Panthers last year. He went to the Detroit Lions in free agency after, the retirement of Frank Ragnow, the failure of Graham Glasgow, the failure of Tate Ratledge, the failure of Christian Mahogany, whoever they put there at center really struggled. So they get an established bona fide center in Cade Mays during free agency, and now Cade Mays is going to miss the first 8 to 10 weeks of the regular season. So you're probably looking at Tate Ratledge just going back over to center, and I think he was much better as a guard. In fact, we ranked him in the top 32 of guards in our most recent Grey Duck Top 250 segment last week. I like him much more as a guard than I do as a center. Maybe they have another option up their sleeve. And granted, if all goes according to schedule, then you're probably only missing the first 5-6 weeks of the season, and the Lions have a pretty easy schedule altogether, but specifically the first part of the season, if you are going to have your new starting center miss some time, if you had to say, okay, he's going to miss 5 games here no matter what, a span of 5 consecutive games, where would you put it along the Detroit Lions schedule? Then you would definitely probably put it during these first 5 games, because I think you can weather the storm if you are the Detroit Lions. I don't think that this is as much of a death knell as the Laremy Tunsil injury is going to be for the Washington Commanders. First, because it's not season ending. It's 8 to 10 weeks. So you get back in mid-October, likely, or mid to late October, and you are ready to go, as long as everything goes in the recovery process goes on without a hitch. And also because we saw what the Detroit Lions were last year without Cade Mays, and they, yes, finished in last place in the NFC North. Technically, they were tied with the Minnesota Vikings at 9-8, and because Minnesota had won both of the games head-to-head against them during the regular season, Detroit was technically the last place team in the NFC North, but they were still a 9-8 team. Their offense was still lights out, even with some of the issues that the interior offensive line had to work through with 3 new guys really on that interior. Now, 2 of those guys have already played a full season with one another, and they played a lot next to each other, which they're going to have to do for the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. I think it will be much easier for the Detroit Lions to weather this storm than it was, or than it will be for the Washington Commanders to weather their storm. This does not have a significant outlook or significant change in outlook for me when I look at my prognostications and predictions for the 2026 Detroit Lions results, and make my projections based off of that, which we will have as we get closer to the regular season. I think they can survive 8 to 10 weeks without Cade Mays. It certainly is a big blow, and is certainly not what you wanted, but it is survivable as long as we see some sort of linear development for your Tate Ratledge and Christian Mahogany in particular, and then whoever it is that is going to take over Ratledge's spot as the other guard. I guess that would probably be your biggest question mark. But again, Detroit had question marks and had issues on the interior all of last year, and still was able to be an above 500 team and a top 10 offense in the NFL. So whatever you thought about Detroit before the Cade Mays injury, I don't really think you need to change your opinion that much, maybe a half game or so, but not to a significant amount like you will if you are projecting the Washington Commanders now with this Laremy Tunsil injury. And moving right along to another injury in the NFC North. This is not a new injury, but it is a new update for an injury, and that is that Kobe Bryant will have surgery to repair his injury that he suffered last week. It originally was going to be maybe like a 2-month, kind of an 8 to 10 week sort of injury like Cade Mays. Now he will be out 4 to 6 months, but will have a full recovery timeline, which is going to keep him out for probably the entire 2026 season. I believe the Adam Schefter report said that the Bears, if they were to make the playoffs, could expect Kobe Bryant to be ready for playoff games. But again, a lot has to go right during the recovery process. That is not an automatic Kobe Bryant will be ready. And of course, you still have to make the playoffs, which now becomes a lot more difficult with your key free agent acquisition on a defense that relied so much on takeaways to even be league average at times last year. If it wasn't for those takeaways, they would have been probably a bottom 5 defense in the NFL, and they lost 2 of the major takeaway getters with Kevin Byard and Nashawn Wright from a year ago. So that is probably going to regress to a more league average rate of turnovers, if not worse than that. And now without Kobe Bryant, you have gotten significantly worse personnel all around the non-takeaway guys, because Bryant is a versatile piece that can play as a corner, that can play in the nickel, that can play outside, that can play as a deep safety, that can play in the box. He can kind of play all over the place and has the athleticism to be effective, and was a key, unheralded, underrated part of the Seattle Seahawks 2026 defense. So without him now, that defense for the Chicago Bears becomes even more of a question mark. Now, they do have Dylan Thieneman, and Thieneman I really liked coming out of the draft. I like him as like a top 20 sort of safety. I guess you'll find out a little bit later on, the Grey Duck Top 250. But you're putting a lot on his plate if you are fully expecting this Chicago Bears defense to even be at the level that it was last year. And I think that is a lot to ask, considering you have lost so many takeaways from a year ago. And probably even if you had those same guys, would have a less likely chance to match those takeaway numbers, because it is such a mercurial sort of stat. And it really isn't something that can be consistently projected on a season-to-season basis. So that is a killer to the Chicago Bears secondary, and I think you should adjust your expectations for the Chicago Bears moving on into the 2026 season. I still think their offense can be lethal, but I think the defense is going to be worse than it was last year. And you might have to prepare yourselves, if you are Chicago Bears fans, for a lot of shootouts. I think you can outscore a lot of your opponents anyway, because I think Caleb Williams is taking another significant step forward this year, and he'll have Colston Loveland as the tight end one, knowing the offense completely for a full season instead of what basically was a half season last year. But you're going to have to win a lot of shootouts, I think, for the Chicago Bears if you want to repeat as NFC North champions. I don't doubt that they can do it, but the path to get there just became a lot more difficult with the Kobe Bryant out for the entire season. It was already difficult with the Kobe Bryant injury in the first place, but now that he is probably not going to be there until a potential playoff berth, makes it that much. It doubles the impact that it originally had, because he was originally expected to miss maybe half the season. I think it was 10 to 12, not 8 to 10 for Kobe Bryant, but still about half the season instead of the full season now. So the impact of his loss is now doubled, and may God have mercy on the defensive soul of the Chicago Bears, because I think offenses are going to drag it up and down the field a little bit unless some guys that we don't know, that are not as nationally known but maybe more locally known, come up and make big changes, big steps forward, or if Dylan Thieneman just becomes a stud from the get-go and can carry up and make up for the lost weight of Kobe Bryant, and then obviously through free agency of Kevin Byard and Nahshon Wright. We will see if all of that is able to happen, but as of right now, it looks a little bit more dire at Soldier Field for the blue and orange in the black and blue division defense, a defense that has kind of been the identity and calling card for the Chicago Bears any single time that they've had success during their franchise history. Let's go away from the injuries for a moment and go to a competition that has finally been decided. And maybe not finally. I think I was expecting this competition to go on a little bit more. I'm a little bit closer to the situation than a lot of folks that aren't Vikings fans. But the Minnesota Vikings and Kevin O'Connell announced yesterday that Kyler Murray has won the quarterback competition at training camp between J.J. McCarthy and obviously Kyler Murray. Vikings brought in Kyler Murray on a league minimum deal. He's still being paid a lot of money. Most of that is from the Arizona Cardinals because he had a lot of guarantees left on his contract, and the Cardinals decided to just eat that anyway, and that allowed Minnesota to get him for pennies, fractions of pennies on the dollar. So the Vikings have an opportunity to have a real steal if Kyler Murray can look like the guy he did, especially in the first half of the 2021 season. But if he looks like the more consistently good versions that we've seen from Kyler Murray over the course of his career, that Minnesota Vikings offense becomes pretty lethal. And I don't think most folks are going to be ready for that. And there's also some other stuff that we can talk about in terms of the changes of the run scheme, going from more of a man system that they've run over the last few years with Kevin O'Connell that lacks some creativity, lacks some like purposeful motions. It has motions, but they don't seem to serve a purpose to the overall play at times. And now going to an outside zone that was so intimately designed by Frank Smith, Mike McDaniel, from the Miami Dolphins over the last couple of seasons. It is an intricate sort of run game. It uses a lot of motions, a lot of short motions, a lot of cheat motions at times, in order to put blockers in a good position to block. So I think that is going to increase the ability of the Minnesota Vikings running game, which should only help Kyler Murray. And when you consider the weapons that Murray will have whenever he does drop back, Aaron Jones is still a very good receiving back. Justin Jefferson, you could make the case that he is still the best wide receiver in the league. On the grade up to top 250, of course, I had him at number 3. Jordan Addison is an excellent number 2 that I think is underrated because he does not get as many targets and has to share targets with the best wide receiver in the NFL. And then you add Juwan Jennings to the mix, who has been a great X receiver throughout the course of his career. He can line up on the line of scrimmage and be the guy to take the jams so that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison can get free releases. And then TJ Hawkinson. I think he's taken some significant steps back since his injury in 2023, but I think is still at least somewhat reliable as a weapon, especially in the red zone. That is a lot of riches for Kyler Murray to work with. Now, we've seen him have good weapons around him before, probably not like this, but the offense, regardless, has always gone and went with Kyler Murray with great weapons or without great weapons. And it has gone and ridden high during his consistent times, and it has looked a little rough during its inconsistent times. And I think what it epitomizes that was that Seattle Seahawks Thursday night game, where the offense was dead on arrival in the first half of that game. And then they gave the team that ended up being the Super Bowl champs, by the way, a run for, on the back of their defense, by the way, a run for their money in the second half where the offense just clicked. And that has kind of been the game that epitomizes Kyler Murray's career. It is a microcosm of Murray's career. The times where it has been bad, the offense has lacked any life, even if it has had DeAndre Hopkins and James Conner and a lot of weapons and embarrassment of riches and Trey McBride to work with. I don't know how much of those guys overlapped at the same time, but you get what I'm saying. And then the times where it looked like a greatest show on turf sort of squad when Kyler Murray has been playing at the level that he was drafted at with a number 1 overall pick in 2019. So even with all these weapons, I think it is going to be up to Kyler Murray to have his first consistent 17-game season in order for Minnesota to be a top 10 offense in the NFL. It is all on Murray's shoulders. We will see if he is able to make it work. But he beats out J.J. McCarthy, who was obviously the Vikings' number 10 pick in the 2024 NFL draft. And he had suffered an injury that kept him out all of his rookie season. They turned to him to be the starter for 2025. He dealt with a couple of different injuries, looked really bad for 3 quarters of his first game, and then looked amazing during the final quarter of his first game. And so amazing that despite a terrible first 3 quarters, he still won NFC Offensive Player of the Week in his first ever NFL regular season game. Then looked really bad, then got injured, then came back, then looked okay against the Lions, really bad the rest of the way before another injury, then came back and looked really good. So he was trending in the right direction, but when you have the big, I mean, I think both of these quarterbacks have upside, but when you have the big upside like Kyler Murray, and we've seen an established, a known commodity sort of upside for Kyler Murray, it was too enticing for the Vikings to pass up. And I still think that this was a true competition. And a lot of folks nationally on podcasts that I listen to have said that, okay, it was not actually a real competition. This was kind of a farce. I don't think that was the case because Kyler Murray needed to learn a brand new offense, a complicated offense, and if you were taking reps away from him, it better not have been for a fake competition that is only there to truly appease the media, because that would be asinine. Now he's going to get a full slate of first-team reps. He's going to be able to have the as good a chance as ever to learn this offense. Now, Kevin O'Connell did say J.J. McCarthy would be quarterback number 2. They also have Carson Wentz and Max Brosmer on the roster, but J.J. McCarthy will be the number 2 quarterback. I have also seen the national discourse assuming that this means J.J. McCarthy will be traded, that this is the end of J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota. I don't think that's necessarily the case. One, Kyler Murray has dealt with a lot of injuries, and Kevin O'Connell has gone out of his way during this last offseason to make sure that with the history of injuries that he has seen as the Vikings head coach, 2023 with Kirk Cousins, and then Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, not really having anything past Kirk Cousins, and then 2025 with all the JJ injuries and the Carson Wentz injuries, having to turn to Max Brosmer. He wants as many good, healthy quarterbacks as possible. I think the only way that J.J. McCarthy gets traded, I think there will be, by the way, J.J. McCarthy starts, because I do not have 100% confidence that Kyler Murray is going to be able to last a full 17-game season with the way that he can sometimes play and just with his injury history in general. I think we will see some of J.J. McCarthy, and he will get his chance to show that he should have won this job. Maybe he takes it and runs with it. Maybe not. But I think he will have an opportunity at some point this season to do that. I think the only way that J.J. McCarthy is traded is if it is for a player that is in his same sort of circumstance, in a location where J.J. McCarthy will basically be in the same circumstance that he is in Minnesota, as a developmental guy that is the second string quarterback, except in a context that is less insulting, like less, or embarrassing, where you were this team's number 10 pick and now have already been benched before the start of your third season and truly your actual second season playing. That is a humiliating sort of place to be in Minnesota, but maybe in Indianapolis for J.J. McCarthy, it wouldn't be as much. And for Anthony Richardson, similarly, pretty humiliating place for him to be in. And we know Kevin O'Connell likes Anthony Richardson. If he came to Minnesota, he'd still be in the same position as he is currently in Indianapolis, just without the humiliation and without the kind of insulting nature that is just natural from losing out on a quarterback competition and being the second string quarterback after being a highly touted college prospect. So the only way that I think it happens is in that sort of situation, which would be like a J.J. McCarthy for Anthony Richardson, which as a Vikings fan I would be more for than the other alternative, which would be like a J.J. McCarthy for a Will Levis in Tennessee. I would be much less open to that option, but if it was for Anthony Richardson, I think that is the only way, or unless a team really offers a nice haul for McCarthy, those would be the only ways, which, again, I don't see any team offering a big haul, but that would be how J.J. McCarthy is traded. I think that is a slim to none chance. I think there's a bigger chance that Anthony Richardson gets released than Anthony Richardson gets traded. And let's talk about Anthony Richardson, because he has told the media that he's not exactly sure where his trade request currently stands within the Colts organization. He has had an up and down camp with Indianapolis, a guy that had all the promise in the world coming into the NFL, but also had all the question marks in the world, and was truly the litmus test of, okay, is traits all that matter? Can you teach a guy how to develop into a really good quarterback if he has all of the traits? And if that is the test, the answer has been no. I think that the test has not yet been completed, and we could still see a version of Anthony Richardson that has success at the NFL level. But I think it would have to be in a new environment. He wants a trade still. He's probably not going to get that trade. I think more likely than not, he will be released, as I said just a moment ago, and will be picked up as maybe, I could see the Los Angeles Rams picking him up and Sean McVay working his magic with him, especially with like the Stetson Bennett. They've decided basically that Stetson Bennett is going to be the number 2 guy, and they want to give Ty Simpson this year to really develop. But Stetson Bennett has looked really bad, as you could probably expect. So I think the Rams, as we get past roster cut down day at the end of August or beginning of September, whenever it technically is, I think they're going to be in the market for a quarterback, and I think Anthony Richardson could be a guy. I think J.J. McCarthy, I guess, could be a guy as well. But we will see. I think Anthony Richardson would be the more possible, probable option, because I don't think there's a world in which J.J. McCarthy just gets straight out released. I think there is a very probable world where Anthony Richardson is straight out released. But so far, nothing going on the trade front for Anthony Richardson. Nothing that we've heard from the Colts side of things. And of course, Anthony Richardson now saying that he hasn't heard anything either, and he doesn't actually know where the Colts stand on his trade request currently. So we will see how all of that plays out. A couple of different notes before we head into the Grey Duck 250 portion of today's show. That is in Chicago. Luther Burden is dealing with an injury. He is a second-year wide receiver who, much like Colston Loveland, really came into his own during the second half of last season and became a very reliable option, kind of surpassed DJ Moore as that vertical slot option that also can run underneath and get yards after the catch. It is a groin injury, and right now his status for the start of the regular season is in doubt, but it doesn't seem to be anything serious. However, for a guy with that sort of explosiveness without a full recovery timeline, that could be something that lingers throughout the course of the season and maybe affects his pure explosiveness, at least for the 2026 campaign, until he can get to an offseason where he can fully recover from that. Jalen Waddle also dealing with an injury, which brings me to a quick point that I want to make. A cautionary tale that is really the risk of going all in. Because also on Tuesday, we had news that Puka Nacua had an injury scare. It turns out it was likely a minor injury, but Sean McVay certainly didn't calm any panic when he said that he wasn't sure what happened to Puka Nacua. I think folks, once they heard Matthew Stafford say that nobody was coming up to him in a panic about Nakua's injury, I think that started to put a lot of just the NFL, especially Rams fans, more at ease. But it still is not... we still don't know exactly what the injury is. It does seem to be a minor injury for Puka Nacua. It does also seem to be a minor injury for Jalen Waddle, a guy that has dealt with minor injuries that have not plagued his career, but certainly affected his career. And you have two teams that have gone in with this all-in sort of mentality. One from the AFC in the Denver Broncos, one from the NFC in the Los Angeles Rams. The only thing that the Broncos really needed, I mean, I guess they still could use a good running back if RJ Harvey doesn't take a step forward this year, but was a wide receiver option, a fast wide receiver option that can run good routes to put opposite of Cortland Sutton. They tried to use Marvin Mims there over the past couple of years. They tried to use Troy Franklin there for the past couple of years. It looked fine at times, but I don't think was consistent enough to be the primary option for an all-in type of season. So they trade a first-round pick to get Jalen Waddle to fill really their only hole throughout their entire team. You go all in, but there is the chance that the player you go all in for gets injured, or another player gets significantly injured that maybe you didn't go all in for, but certainly affects your chances to truly go all in. That is the risk that you take. It is a gamble. It is something that could cost general managers their job through something that is not their fault on their own, but is something that you as fans will love to see your general manager do, is swing for the fences. Sometimes you're going to strike out because of bad injury luck. Thankfully, in both the case of the Broncos and the Rams, it seems like at this moment they have avoided any major injury scares. But as much as we could pencil in both of those teams to be in the Super Bowl and have a fairly decent chance, relatively, to be right about that, any single day, any single misstep, literal misstep, not figurative misstep, any single literal misstep could change the entire course of one of these teams' season and change how we look at their decision makers, despite it not really being a decision maker issue. It is kind of just a cool little thought experiment. A misplaced turf pellet could cause the firing of one of the top general managers in the NFL, for example. Just the butterfly effect. I guess that happens, you could use the butterfly effect not just in football, but just in everyday life. But it is something that is scary to think about, and which is why if you are one of these teams that does go all in, you are on the edge of your seat waiting for the other shoe to drop all season long, and it becomes a much more stressful, I think, watch throughout the course of the season, but a much more cathartic watch, especially when it materializes with the goal being realized, the goal of going all in being realized, and that being a Super Bowl trophy. Some other news and notes. Teddy Bridgewater has announced his retirement from the NFL. He had retired, I think, after the 2023 season, took the 2024 season off to coach as in Miami, led his team to I think it was his old high school that it might have even been that he went to, but led that team to a state championship in Florida. Then after the season ended, asked Dan Campbell if he could come be the backup for the Lions, was the backup for the Lions for the rest of that 2024 season. Jared Goff got injured for a moment in the divisional game against Washington, so you had Teddy Bridgewater in the game in a playoff situation after just 2 months earlier being on the sidelines of a high school, and then he decides to stay in the NFL for the 2025 season because of some stupid Florida rules that they set. Teddy Bridgewater just trying to help his own players on his team be able to get from school to the football field, get to home from the football field, and provide transportation. He was suspended for a full year, I think. I think it was indefinite at first, but it forced like a law change in Florida. And because he had to step away for last season in 2025, he decided to just spend the entire year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, re-signed with the Lions in the offseason, but now is going to step away from the sport for the second time. We will see, though, if after another successful high school coaching season, once November and December come around, if he ends up joining a team that has playoff hopes so that he can try to, end his career on a high note, even if he's not the guy taking the final snaps. We'll see if that is the case. As of right now, he has officially retired from the NFL. And then Hunter Henry gets a 2-year contract worth $20 million, a very good receiving option over the last couple of years for Drake May. Had a career high in receiving yards last year, also a second most receiving touchdowns of any season in his career with 7. Well-deserved. He gets paid on the extension, $20 million over the course of 2 years. Should provide a pretty reliable middle-of-the-road, but reliable tight end for Drake May to throw to for the next couple of seasons. And then from the Hall of Fame weekend, we obviously had Roger Craig, Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, and Vinatieri all being inducted into... I know I'm forgetting one. I don't know why I am forgetting one, but it is Vinatieri, it is Roger Craig, it is Larry Fitzgerald, Drew Brees. I'm going to be beating myself over this one. I have to look it up. I'm sorry. But we had all of those guys inducted into the Hall of Fame over the weekend. And, of course, Roger Craig announcing his diagnosis of dementia and making a pretty poignant statement of saying that, yes, football gave him a lot of good, but now it is providing a lot of bad. I can't believe I forgot Luke Kuechly. All apologies on my behalf for all of the Carolina Panthers fans out there. Luke Kuechly, the fifth member of... I am utterly embarrassed. The fifth member of the 2026 Hall of Fame class. But best wishes over to Roger Craig and his family. Obviously, dementia sucks, and it's coming off pretty quickly off the news of Chris Johnson's ALS diagnosis, which also seems to be at least highly likely to have been in part caused by his NFL career. And head injury suffered during his NFL career. Roger Craig saying that his doctors have said that, yes, the dementia can partially be caused because of his concussions history during his NFL career. So football gives, football takes away. We still love the sport, but we recognize the dangers that come with it. It is kind of an interesting line to walk, a fine line to walk, recognizing that a lot of the players that we are watching today, even with the upgrades and safety that have been made across the NFL, a lot of players that we are watching today, 20 years from now, are going to be dealing with similar issues. And it is a bummer to think about. But these guys love the game. We love watching the game. I don't really know how to speak on that from a moral perspective. I don't think I have the wherewithal. I don't think I have the knowledge, the wisdom to speak on what that means from a moral perspective. I think there are parts of it that seem icky, and there are part of it that is also like, okay, they are making the choice. They are making money for it. They are being compensated. And we are being entertained. I don't know. It's a fine line to walk. I'm not going to make a moral declaration on that, but I am going to send my well wishes, my prayers over to Roger Craig and his family. Moving on now to our final segment of the show, and that is the Grey Duck 250. And for those of you who have been watching the Grey Duck NFL show since a couple months ago, the Grey Duck 250 is my attempt to rank the top 250 players going into the NFL season of 2026. And in order to do that, I am first breaking down each position, the top 32 players at each major position. And this is not based on purely track record. This is not, these guys have had the best last 3 years, with weighted more towards the first year. These are the guys who have had the best numbers over the last 3. It is not necessarily just that. Track record, yes, plays a part in it, but it's also my own projections for what I think is going to happen in the 2026 season. And today we're talking about the safeties, the top 32 safeties in the NFL. Again, based on who I think is going to end up being the top 32 once we put an end to the 2026 season. And we'll start from number 32, and that is Reed Blankenship, now in a new home after spending the last couple of seasons, or the most of his career, with the Philadelphia Eagles, winning a championship with them. He is now a member of the Houston Texans, joins a defense that is all around good there. He is a very solid safety, if not unspectacular. But he comes in at number 32 on this list. Number 31, I'm going with Justin Reid. Justin Reid, who obviously had his best seasons as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now with the New Orleans Saints, I believe in his second season as a free safety with the Saints. After playing in 15 games last year with an interception. He is a veteran player that, at the very least, even if he may be declining in athleticism, has a lot of promise as a cerebral sort of safety who is going to be in the right spot for his team more often than not. Number 30, Cole Bishop. I really like Cole Bishop. There was one play that I saw from Cole Bishop this last season where it was like, yeah, this guy gets it. He's for the Buffalo Bills, and it was against the Saints. It was a end around it was an end around into a reverse to a pass to Spencer Rattler, and Cole Bishop had great eye discipline on this play, read it the whole way. If he doesn't make the break at the right time, or if he bites on the end around or the reverse, he is out of position and cannot make this play, and the Saints score a touchdown. But he is in the right position, he comes through, and he ends up intercepting the pass because he watches the play. He puts his eyes in the right place, makes a break on Spencer Rattler, who is the quarterback at the snap, wide receiver, intended target on the wide receiver pass. Cole Bishop came up and made a play. He made an interception to really, in a game at that point, which was up in the air and probably shouldn't have been up in the air between the Bills and the Saints, especially considering what both of those teams were last year. That was a momentum swinging play that Cole Bishop made. And yes, he has his misses, but I expect as he enters, I think, year 3 of his NFL career, I expect those misses to be cleaned up a little bit more and for him to be a pretty good safety in that Buffalo secondary. Number 29 is Josh Metellus of the Minnesota Vikings, an excellent downhill player, an excellent underneath zone defender. Doesn't give up. He can play versatilely anywhere. He can play free safety. When he is playing in a deep zone, he might allow a little bit more space, a little bit more cushion than you would like, but he doesn't really get beat over the top. That's the give and the take that you have right there. But he is excellent against the run. He's excellent at shedding blocks for a safety and knifing in and making tackles. There was a play last year where he is one-on-one against Saquon Barkley in the open field, and he's able to make a tackle for loss on what was a screen out to Saquon Barkley. Number 28, Evan Williams of the Green Bay Packers, similar sort of mold as Josh Metellus, downhill player, also kind of a similar sort of mold as Cole Bishop. He's an aggressive player that can be maybe at times to a fault too aggressive, like in that Bears game in which the Packers actually won. Evan Williams was supposed to be responsible for the man who ended up getting open in the end zone, and he bit on I believe it was a play action or a fake screen, came up, the guy got wide open, and Keyshawn Nixon, of all people, thankfully saw this. Thankfully, if you're a Packers fan, which I am not, so not thankfully for me, but thankfully for Green Bay, saw Evan Williams bite, abandoned his man, saw the Bears man get wide open, and made a terrific play to go and intercept that pass. So that was good on Keyshawn Nixon, but that is an example of a mistake that Evan Williams can make. But you take those mistakes because what he can normally do when he has that aggressiveness is make a stop. So Evan Williams comes in at number 28, and perhaps the only thing preventing him from being higher is the over-aggressiveness at times. Number 27, we are going to go with Javon Holland, and hopefully he, for the New York Giants, is able to play better now with a new head coach, with a new defensive coordinator in his second season with the New York Giants. There is a chance that he falls all the way out of the top 32. But I am not expecting that just yet. I think he is too good of a player to have as bad of a season as he did last year for a second year in a row. Number 26, a free safety in the most classic sense, Cam Bynum of the Indianapolis Colts, a ball hawk, a guy that is going to keep everything in front of him and is going to be your safety valve on most deep passes. He can range the field. He might not always be the best tackler, but he is your number 26 safety. Number 25, this is more of a projection, Andrew Makuba. He'll get the full-time safety snaps. Now with Reed Blankenship out of the mix in Philadelphia, he'll have a chance to make more of an impact here in 2026. A lot of folks loved him in the draft, and he can do a little bit of everything for Philadelphia. I was not one of the guys that loved him, but in what I saw on film last year, he proved me wrong at least a little bit, at least in his rookie season. Number 24, it is Trevon Moehrig of I think he's with the Carolina Panthers now. He had previously played for the Las Vegas Raiders, but now with the Carolina Panthers, a very good underneath defender, a good slot defender as well. He comes in at number 24. Number 23, and I guess I'm banking on him being healthy, but Kirby Joseph, a hard-hitting safety, also a ball-hawking safety. Him and his teammate, who's going to appear later on this list, both kind of play the game very, very similarly, where they are headhunters and they are ball hawks, and they are typically in the right place at the right time. Obviously a down year due to injury last year for Kirby Joseph, so he might be able to take even more. I mean, if the injury is still lingering, he can definitely fall out of the top 32, but if he shows that he has truly recovered from that injury and plays like he did in 2024, then obviously he moves into probably the top 15, top 10 sort of range. Number 22, Jaquan Brisker, another veteran safety that is downhill, that you can count on to be in the right place at the right time. Number 21, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we are going with Tyke Smith. Again, some more projection here to get him up to 21, but I have liked what I've seen so far in the career of Tyke Smith. Jalen Ramsey at number 20 as a safety. He can play as a nickel defender. You could also put him as a cornerback. I chose for the purposes of the Grey Duck 250 to keep him as a safety because that is where most of his snaps are going nowadays. A splash player that I think is going to continue to transition really well into this full-time safety role. Number 19, a guy who I really liked last year, Craig Woodson, a sure tackler that stays with his gap, that stays with his receiver, that comes up and makes tackles, that can get guys in open space. Craig Woodson, the second-year player, granted a little bit older for a second-year player, of the New England Patriots, is my number 19. Malachi Starks of the Baltimore Ravens is number 18. Got off to a slow start in his career last year, but I still saw a lot of what I saw in college from him on film when he was on the field at times last year as a rookie with Baltimore. So I think there is a lot there that can be harnessed for Malachi Starks. Number 17, I mentioned him earlier, Dylan Thieneman. I think he's going to have a big year. I don't know if that's going to be right away, but for the Bears' fortunes, they better hope that it is. He is a rangy safety that has played in the box, but has also played a lot of deep safety. Obviously, Oregon had a really good year there last year. Also had a good career in almost a completely different role when he was with, I believe it was Purdue. So he can do a lot of different things. He's going to be asked to do a lot of different things with Dennis Allen, and he comes in at number 17. Number 16 is Dallas Cowboys safety Jalen Thompson. He comes over in the offseason from Arizona. And Jalen Thompson paired really well with Budda Baker. I think Caleb Downs is going to be a better version of Budda Baker. So I think Jalen Thompson is going to pair very well with Caleb Downs as well. Number Excuse me. Number 15 is Kalen Bullock of the Houston Texans. There are 3 Houston Texans safeties on this list, by the way. Kalen Bullock is going to be the free safety. He's also known as the guy who has probably been the fewest millimeters away from actually intercepting passes instead of letting them go for touchdowns. We saw that against Green Bay, I think, in his rookie season. I think we saw it as well during a spot last year. I can't remember specifically when it was, but it just seems like there are a lot of stuff that go right by the fingertips of the safety for Houston and don't always end up in his hands. I expect him, as he gets older and puts himself in a better position to start and allows himself the break just a millisecond earlier, he's going to make a lot more plays on those types of balls here in 2026. Talofa Hufanga of the Denver Broncos comes in at number 14. He can play deep. I think he's best used in underneath zones, but he is an overhang, also field capper for the Denver Broncos defense. He mixes in really well there with the rest of the elite Bronco defenders. Number 13, Minkah Fitzpatrick. A lot of folks think that he still doesn't got it because it doesn't always show up in the stat sheet, but the film would tell you otherwise. Minkah Fitzpatrick does a lot of things right. He makes up for a lot of the mistakes that his teammates can make. He can be the eraser for any team. So even in his more advanced age, I'm going with Minkah Fitzpatrick of the now New York Jets, I believe. Number 12 is Jesse Bates III, a guy that can be your deep middle safety in a cover 3 sort of system. He can also be a deep half safety if you need him in a cover 2 or cover 4. Jesse Bates still getting it done in his veteran seasons. Antonio Johnson of the Jacksonville Jaguars is coming in at number 11, a little underrated player, but makes splashy plays and also typically makes the right plays and is in the right spot at the right time. Number 10, we're going with Brian Branch, and he would be higher if it wasn't for the injury question marks heading into 2026. Again, much like Kirby Joseph, a ball hawk, a headhunter. I think he is also better than Kirby Joseph at the line of scrimmage and can do a little bit more. And whatever Kirby Joseph does, Brian Branch just does a bit better. So that puts him at number 10. Number 9 is Budda Baker of the Arizona Cardinals. Downhill safety, versatile safety, is kind of given free reign to go wherever he wants and to create his own assignments on every single play because of his athletic ability, because of his football instincts and IQ. They trust him a lot in that defense, and he typically rewards that trust. We'll see if he has that same sort of freedom of movement and freedom of assignment with a new head coach in Mike LaFleur, obviously taking things on the offensive side, but with now Jonathan Gannon out of the building. Number 8 is the Atlanta Falcons safety Xavier Watts. 5 interceptions, a couple of fumble returns. He led all rookies in takeaways last year. When I saw him on film, I saw Ed Reed. I saw a cerebral player that reads route concepts excellently, that is a step or two ahead of even your best safeties in terms of when he clicks and closes onto a play, and when he decides to cap field space, he has just excellent instincts and reminds me a lot of Ed Reed, and showed it in spurts last year as a member of the Atlanta Falcons. Number 7, Antoine Winfield Jr. of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Another one of those Budda Baker type molds where he can pretty much do whatever it is you need him to do. Wherever your defense's biggest weakness is, he can play that position and fill it in and turn it into a strength. Number 6 is Kevin Byard. We talked about him. He obviously spent the most recent parts of his career with the Chicago Bears. And now heading into 2026, he is a part of the New England Patriots, so he should pair nicely next to Craig Woodson as the deep ball hawking free safety. Number 5, Jalen Petrie, a nickel. He will be... I'm sorry. I was just reading through my list, and it seems like I forgot somebody that, in the same vein as Dan Henley, I forgot to put into the top 5 because I was like, wait, where did I put this player? And that is Nick Eamon-Warry. Apologies to Seattle fans. Also apologies now for Texans fans. I said you had 3 safeties. You are now moving down to 2 safeties because Reed Blankenship is out of the top 32. We'll still put Jalen Petrie at number 5. Excellent nickel defender. He was one of the reasons why Houston won their game against the Chargers and why Houston was able to stay in the game against the New England Patriots during the playoffs. Not against the Chargers, I should say against the Steelers. The Patriots beat the Chargers, and then the Texans beat or lost to the Patriots in the divisional round. Jalen Petrie is number 5. Number 4 is Xavier McKinney of the Green Bay Packers, another splashy playmaker that also just happens to be in the right spot. I'm going to go number 3, Derwin James of the Los Angeles Chargers. So I guess actually he'll be number 4 because number 3 is going to be Nicky Manwari of the Seattle Seahawks. Game changer for that defense last year. Should be more of the same in 2026. Expect big things from Nicky Manwari, who really didn't fully get up to speed until about halfway through the season. I think a full season of that Nicky Manwari is going to paint him as a top 5 safety this year. So he comes in at number 3. Number 2 is Caleb Downs of the Dallas Cowboys. Loved Caleb Downs, my top player from this last draft. Hands down, he reminds me of Bob Sanders. If he stays healthy and plays like Bob Sanders for a full career, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And the Dallas Cowboys, I think, got the best player in the draft at number 10. Caleb Downs is my number 2 safety, but I still can't put him past Kyle Hamilton, who does everything that Caleb Downs does, but has even better athleticism, better height, better speed, better strength, and he has the traits to go along with everything else that Caleb Downs brings. So that is Kyle Hamilton as the top safety in the NFL. So real quick, we'll go through this 1 through 32. Goes Kyle Hamilton, Caleb Downs, Nick Emanwari of the Seattle Seahawks, Derwin James of the Chargers, Xavier McKinney of the Packers, Jalen Petrie of the Texans, Kevin Byard of the Patriots, Antoine Winfield Jr. of the Buccaneers, Xavier Watts of the Falcons, Budda Baker of the Cardinals, Brian Branch of the Lions, Antonio Johnson of the Jaguars, Jesse Bates of the Falcons, Minka Fitzpatrick of the Jets, Tolafa Hafunga of the Denver Broncos, Kalen Bullock of the Houston Texans, Jalen Thompson of the Dallas Cowboys, Dylan Thieneman of the Chicago Bears, Malachi Starks of the Baltimore Ravens, Craig Woodson of the New England Patriots, Jalen Ramsey of the, I think he's with the Steelers now, Tyke Smith of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jaquan Brisker, Kirby Joseph, Trevon Moehrig, Andrew Makuba of the Philadelphia Eagles, Cam Bynum of the Indianapolis Colts, Javon Holland of the New York Giants, Evan Williams of the Green Bay Packers, Josh Metellus of the Minnesota Vikings, Cole Bishop of the Buffalo Bills, and number 32 is Justin Reed of the New Orleans Saints. That is your definitive list of the top 32 safeties as we work towards the top 250 players in the Grey Duck Top 250. And that is going to be all that we have for you for tonight's show. We will be back in a couple of days, maybe talk about some of the preseason games, as we have a full slate of them coming on Thursday, as well as whatever other news is going on in the NFL and our next installation of the Grey Duck Top 250. And that's it for this episode of the Grey Duck NFL Show. Thanks for listening. If you got something out of it, a subscribe, a rating, a like, a share goes a long way. We'll be back here on Friday with more NFL talk. Straight takes, no fluff. That's the Grey Duck way. Have a good night.